Hello, everybody. This is Chad Calek, and welcome to episode 3 of the In a Crowded Room podcast. For this episode, I'm going to answer probably one of the most common questions that I get asked, which is, what is the scariest thing that you've ever experienced in regard to the paranormal? The scariest overall event that I've ever experienced actually did not come during any kind of investigation or anything like that. It was something that Justin and I accidentally experienced, and it's something that I think about probably at least once or twice a month still today. And this is, it's probably been 20 years since this happened. In fact, I remember when it happened. It was in November, just after Halloween in November in Ames, Iowa in 1998. Justin and I were actually writing our first script that we've ever written. It was for a film called The Private Public, which ended up being the first movie that we ever made. And got really fortunate, actually sold it to Showtime, believe it or not, all the way from Iowa. But when writing that script, we had never written a script before, and we didn't really know what we were doing. We'd never made a film before. Hadn't really done anything in the film business before, but we knew we needed a script. And we quickly figured out that when it comes to writing something as complex as a script, you need to isolate yourself from the world. Just because creativity is just not something that could be interrupted. Once you get into writing, you need to be in an environment that fosters, creative thought. And if you have to worry about other things in the world, it just doesn't work. So we would get hotel rooms to write in. And we started out in Des Moines, Iowa, because I lived there, and we would, rent hotel rooms in supposedly haunted hotels. And we had stayed in probably every haunted hotel, in Des Moines, notably the Fort Des Moines Hotel. I never had anything really happen. So he had stopped by on this weekend, and we decided that we were actually going to go to Ames, which is where the Iowa State University is, because we wanted to try to stay at the Memorial Union Hotel, because that was supposed to be haunted. And we drove there not even thinking about the fact that it was a Saturday, and the reason that was an issue is because there was a home game for the Cyclones. And if you've ever been to a Big 12 football game, those small towns, those small college towns get crazy because the population will double, during a home game. And so we got to Ames, and we called the Union first. Actually, I called the Union, and they said, we're all booked up, with the home game in town, we're completely booked. And I was like, that sucks. I really wanted to stay there. And I asked the gentleman who answered the phone, could you take my number and call me back? If someone cancels or someone leaves, anything like that. And he said, yeah, sure. And he took my number. And we called around for probably a good hour trying to find a hotel room to write the script. And after an hour of calling places, we had decided that we were just going to head back to Des Moines because we can certainly find a hotel room there. Not haunted per se, but just somewhere to work on the script. And right before we left, I said, let's check with the Union again. Let me call them back and just see maybe if something happened. So I call him back up, and I'm like, hey, this is my name's Chad. I called earlier. I was just calling again to see if you had anything that opened up before we head back to Des Moines. And the gentleman says, yeah, actually we do. So I was like, Justin, dude, we're in, So, we park in the Union parking, which is separate from the building. And we walk across this small lawn. It's freezing outside. I mean, absolutely freezing. And we get inside the Union. We go up and we meet this gentleman, John. And very nice guy. He was just very proper in the way he spoke with us. And here's your keys, Mr. Calek. Good evening. And like that type of thing. And I thought he was kind of playing with us. But we got an incredible rate on the room. I don't remember the exact dollar amount, but it was something, in the area of $30. And, Justin had put it on his credit card. So Justin and I are stoked. We're like, wow, let's go do this. we take the elevator up to, it was the 13th floor is what we were on. And the elevator goes all the way up, and it took forever. It was really, really slow. And we commented on the fact that, God, this elevator is taking forever. And we just assumed it was because the hotel was sold out, they said. So it was packed because of the home game. So we get to the top of the elevator, and we come out, and we both take about 3 or 4 steps. And I remember we both stop, and we just kind of look at each other. And we don't really say anything. We just kind of look at each other. I'm like, huh. And then Justin just, is looking back at me, and then he just looks forward and starts walking. So we got to the room, opened the door up. We sat our computer out, or Justin's computer at the time. And, we started chit-chatting, small-talking about the script. And I sat down, and I had an idea right away to write where we left off. And right as I get ready to start typing, I'm just overcome with anxiety. And I turn to Justin and I go, hey, man. And before I could say anything, Justin goes, yeah, I feel it. I go, yeah, you feel that? I'm like, do you have like anxiety right now or just something feels off? And he goes, yeah. And I'm like, yeah, why am I so freaked out? He's like, I don't know. And I'm like, why didn't you say anything to me, when we paused outside the elevator? And he goes, just something didn't feel right, man. Just something was off. It was something subconscious that we both felt. We didn't know what it was, so we didn't say anything. And as we're talking, I'm like, yeah, I don't know what that was, but Jesus, I just feel like I can't even write right now. I have so much anxiety. And he's like, totally, dude. I totally feel it. And I'm like, well, nothing's happened to us, so let's just try to push through this. So as we're writing, I'm thinking about the hallway. Like, why didn't we say anything to each other when we stopped? What was it that was so off? And all of a sudden it dawns on me, and I go, wait a minute. And he's like, what? And I go, when we got off the elevator. He goes, yeah. And I go, dude, it was dead silent. Like you could have heard a pin drop. And he's like, yeah. And I go, I thought this place was so packed and so sold out that, we barely got in here. And he goes, yeah. And I go, no, there wasn't a sound. And he's like, no, you're right. There wasn't. I mean, you couldn't even hear the breeze. You couldn't hear weather outside. It was just pure silence. And I go, let's go look again. So we both get up and we walk out in the hallway, and yeah, I mean, it is pure silence. We're walking by every door, putting our ear up to the door, and there's just nothing. There's nothing. So we both kind of creepily go back to the room. And I look at him and I'm like, man, like, what is it about this whole, like right now, just something feels so off. And we start looking around the room, and I'm trying to look if there's anything weird in the room that's bothering me, that maybe subconsciously is bothering me. And the only thing that I notice is that there's this little, it's like a little stand that like usually you'd put it by the bed, like it's a bed stand, but it's oddly placed in the room. It's like a little square wooden box type of stand. So I walk over to it, and I just kind of look at it, pick it up, kind of pull it away from the wall. And behind the stand, I see all these black marks. They're like these black crescent moon marks. They look like someone took like a black crayon and just made like these black crescent moons behind this little wooden stand. And again, I don't think much of it. I'm just like, that's weird. My first thought was maybe someone had a child in the room, and they just drew on the wall, and before they left, they wanted to cover it up with this little wooden stand. So I sit back down, and I'm like, man, so why is this place supposed to be haunted? And the rumor was that there was just a lot of people over the years had died, like most hotels. A lot of people die in hotels, and that's why it was supposed to be haunted. And while that's true, that there were a lot of people that died in the hotel, as we're talking, I remember that there was a recent death. And the reason I know this is because I worked at the Iowa State Daily, and there was just a story about the student. He was an Asian man who basically was in a fraternity and couldn't study. So he checked out of the fraternity, and he got a room, and he spent 2 weeks studying for finals. And I guess he did really bad on one of his finals, and he came back to his room and he committed suicide. And I remember in the article it talked about how he hung himself, but the article did not say what room that this gentleman did this in. So we start talking. I'm like, you don't think there's any chance that they rented the room to us that this kid committed suicide in? And Justin's like, no, really? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I mean, it was just weird that there was no rooms available, and then all of a sudden there are. I mean, what are the chances that they just decided, hey, rent this room out? And he's like, no. And I'm like, huh. And we still have this feeling, guys, and this is not going away. I mean, it just feels like someone's in the room with us. And the lights are on. It's not like it's dark. So I start looking around the room again, and I'm like, well, where could this person have hung themselves from? Because they weren't exceptionally high ceilings. So I was trying to figure out, if you were going to hang yourself, how could you do it? And, we look in the closet, and now there's no way it could have happened in there. No way it could have happened in the bathroom. And what we see is the only thing that you could have actually hung yourself on in the room are these old steel, like water spigots for fires. And they're strong. I mean, they're coming out of the concrete wall. And we look up, and the only, place in the room that you could, tie yourself to in any capacity and hang yourself would be right above where that little black box is, that little, like that bedstand I was telling you about. So I grab it and I move it again. I'm like, oh my God, I think I know exactly what those black marks are. And I'm like, Justin, these black marks are the back of his heels. If he hung himself here and he starts kicking, the back of his shoes are scuffing up this wall. And right as I say that, I could see that Justin, it sinks in, and he's just like, holy shit. And I knew it. I knew it. God, I knew it. Without knowing it, I knew it. Right away, I'm like, man, we're in this room. We are in this room where this happened. So we both sit there for probably a good 10 minutes, just terrified, didn't say anything. And I look at him and I'm like, so what do you want to do? I'm like, should we get out of here? He's like, I don't know. Do you want to go? And I'm like, man, I do, but I don't. I'm freaked out, but I don't know. I mean, this is crazy. Like, I've never experienced anything like this before. And so we decide that we're going to stick it out. We're going to try to at least spend the night. And when the sun comes up, then we'll leave. So we're like, okay. So again, I try writing, but I can't. There's just nothing. There's nothing to write, man. And there's a terror that is with us. It's not leaving us. I mean, I'm to the point where my hands are shaking. I'm so freaked out. And again, the lights are on. Justin's sitting next to me. It was just the realization that none of this was on our mind. We weren't going there to ghost hunt, and we were stoked to write. We were stoked we got a room in there. And from the second we stepped off that elevator, I mean, it just seemed like we were in a different world or something. It was like, why is nobody here? Like, why is nobody on this floor? Why is it quiet? Why do I feel this terror in my chest? Why did I find these black marks below the only place where this person could commit suicide, if this is in fact the room that happened? And I'm convinced at this point it is. So we both decide, let's just go to bed. So he gets in his bed, I get in my bed, and I'm like, dude, I'm so terrified to turn the lights off. He's like, yeah, me too. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna turn the lights off right now. He's like, okay. So I reach over, and it was so hard, and I turn the lights off. And about 5 seconds goes by, and I turn it back on. And he's like, Jesus, God, do you feel that? He's like, yeah. He's like, dude, this is terrifying. I'm like, yeah. I go, what's crazy is what is making us this scared? We didn't see anything. Nothing's being thrown at us. No one's touching us. It was affecting us in such a way where we were mortified of this room. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to shut the lights off. And I'm like, and we're going to keep them off until morning comes, dude. And we're going to fight through this, man. Because I don't like when things have power over you. And I'm like, we're going to fight through this. So we do. And we talk throughout the night. We're talking in the darkness about, what this gentleman must have felt and how terrible that is that you could bank so much on a test and study and work so hard. And then you'd blow the test and you would feel like your life is over because of that and how sad that would be. And the sadness that he must have felt in that moment, where he hung himself. And finally, it was the longest night of just being scared the whole time. There was never a break. And throughout the night, we never heard a door open. We never heard a person cough, laugh. We never heard an ounce of conversation. And this is supposed to be a sold out hotel. So the following morning, we pack up everything as fast as we possibly can once that sun comes up. And we just bounce. So we go up and we get some breakfast and talk about the whole evening. And is that possible? Could they have rented that room out to us? And it's starting to bother me the more and more that we talk about it, that this room was rented out to us. Because I'm convinced at this point that has to be the room. What else would those black scuff marks be? Which were hidden behind an end table that somebody put over there to block it, right below the only area where you could actually hang yourself. So I'm convinced that was the room. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to call them back and, basically tell them, yeah, you can't be renting places like this out. Especially this suicide was recent. It was within like the last, I think, it was like the last year or two that this happened. And so I called them up, and a gal answers the phone, and I'm like, hey, my name's, Chad. I stayed there last night with Justin Holstein. You guys will have his card on record. And I go, I just need to know if the room that we stayed in was in fact the room where this suicide took place with this Asian gentleman. And I'm like, if you haven't heard of it, because it's just somebody working at the desk, I said, without question, your management will know what I'm talking about. So, I really need an answer. Did we stay in the room where this gentleman committed suicide? And she's like, okay, well, just hold on 1 second. And she puts me on hold. So I hold for a few minutes, and she comes back and says, Chad? And I go, yeah. And she's like, we don't have you on record. And I'm like, oh, well, I go, like I said, I was staying with Justin. It was Justin gave his credit card, so it was probably him. But, my name's Chad. I was staying with Justin. We were on the 13th floor, and I gave her my room number. It was like 1302 or something. She's like, okay, hold, please. And she comes back on again, and she goes, yeah, we don't have any record of a Justin Holstein either. And I'm like, well, listen, that's impossible. I go, just talk to John. I'm like, John, his name was John. He's a really nice guy. He gave us a special room rate that was really super low. I'm like, just talk to him. He'll confirm everything. And she's like, what'd you say his name was? And I go, John. And she pauses and says, sir, we don't have any John that works here. And I am freaking out. My heart drops. I'm like, what? And she's like, yeah, we do not have a John that works here. I'm like, do you have a manager named John? No, we don't, sir. I didn't know what to say. I was like, what? So I'm telling, Justin's hearing bits and pieces of this conversation because I'm on obviously one end of the phone, and I'm explaining this to him afterwards, and To this day, I have no idea what happened. I mean, this felt like we stepped into the freaking Twilight Zone. From the moment we stepped off that elevator, it just seemed like I don't know, like stepped into a different dimension or something. It just seemed like we were alone with the spirit of that person. Um, to make a long story short, I ended up calling back there another time and talked to the manager. And the manager said that yes, the hanging did happen on that floor, but he said that no one's really sure anymore where it happened. And I said, well, why is that? She said, well, it's a great mystery here, because after it happened, the management at that time scrambled all the room numbers. So none of them are in order. So if you go to the 13th floor and you look, it's not like it's, 1301, then 1302, then 1303. Like you get out the elevator and then it's like 1307, 1301, 1322, 1305. Like the management scrambled the numbers so nobody will ever know where that room is. So long story short, it could have very well been the room that we stayed in. But to this day, the mystery remains, what room did this happen? As of today, nobody really knows. But the fact that there was no John that rented us this room, it's crazy. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode of In a Crowded Room. I'll be back tomorrow with more.